but you can't be the first to do anything. If you're the first to say or do anything, people will eat you alive. What is that about, folks? What is it in human nature that we just like, anytime someone's different or wants to change something, we like want to kill them? What is that about? We should discuss this, because what is this? Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking to watch this video. Today's video is going to be another episode of Makeup and History, yeah. For those of you guys who are curious, I'm changing the theme song because I was looking at my analytics for my other videos and I noticed that the retention for my videos, like the length of time that people are watching, drops tremendously once I start singing, and that really hurt my feelings a lot, not going to lie, but I understand I'm not the greatest singer. So for those of you who did enjoy that theme song, I will sing it at the end of the video, so stick around to sing it with me. If you're new here, Makeup and History is a series on my channel where I put on makeup while talking about a historical event, a scandal from the past, or just a person that I find absolutely fascinating. In my last upload, I talked about Wonder Woman, the history of Wonder Woman, and the man who created her, his very fascinating personal life. If you haven't seen this video yet, go and check it out. It's a lot of fun. I know there are going to be people out there who are asking where the hell I've been. I know. I don't really know, you guys. I haven't not been doing anything. I think about these videos literally every day, and I think I've decided I can only do 2 a month. That's what it's looking like is reasonable for me mentally, emotionally, is 2 videos a month. 2 makeup and history videos a month. And in the meantime, I'm going to start making other content so that my whole channel isn't consumed by this series like it has been for the past 6 months. So I want to apologize. I get all of you guys' messages and concerns. I'm here. I'm all right. I'm back. We're back today, and it is February, Black History Month. So for the first video in Black History Month, we're going to be talking about Malcolm X and the events that led to his death. If you haven't already and you would like to, please subscribe to my channel. Subscribe. Turn on that notification bell so that you're notified every single time I upload a new video. And thank you guys so much for being patient with me. I love you so much. Okay, I've talked enough in this intro. Let's put on some makeup and get into this story. You guys, it is really windy here today, so I apologize if my mic picks up some of the wind going on outside. All of the products and everything that I'm using on my face today will be listed down in the description box below with links in case you're curious. And if you are familiar with this story and the life of Malcolm X, please be sure to fact check me down in the comments below, as well as include any additional information that I don't say, I forget to say, or that I might not even know. I'm just one girl, so if I get it wrong, please politely correct me. I love when you guys correct things and I learn new things. I really genuinely appreciate that, but I make mistakes too. I'm only human. I'm only human. So before we talk about the how and why Malcolm X died, we first need to talk about who he was, in case you didn't know. Malcolm X was an activist and revolutionary in the 1950s and 60s for Black American rights. At the height of his career, he was considered to be a very controversial figure. He was often described as an extremist, a very angry man. He was a racist. He was all these things that weren't actually true to his character. I think he was really misunderstood. The idea that I had myself growing up of Malcolm X was that he was the more like angry, aggressive civil rights leader. And this was because he was often compared to Martin Luther King Jr., who everyone portrayed as a literal saint, even though he wasn't. And that's coming up in the next video. But when you compare the two men, it does seem like Martin Luther King Jr. was the more reasonable one because he advocated for peace and harmony and can't everybody just get along? In the words of Rodney King, can't everybody just get along? I don't know, Rodney King, can they? After doing research for this video, it's now my understanding that the image that's portrayed of Malcolm X was done so intentionally to dissuade people from hearing what he actually had to say. He was purposely portrayed as this angry, aggressive Black man so that people didn't listen to him. They would just write him off as angry and crazy and racist. And some of the stuff he said was racist. Calling white people devils, he would refer to white people as white devils, and saying that white people shouldn't be trusted is racist. It is racist. However, I don't think it's any more racist than Lyndon B. Johnson referring to the Civil Rights Act as the bill. Hard R, folks. And I don't think that 2 wrongs make a right. I don't think any of it is right. However, we're often told that Lyndon B. Johnson is a civil rights hero, even though he literally did everything in his power to keep that bill from passing, right up until the day he had to sign it. But we're not taught about that, and that image of him isn't portrayed because it makes him look bad. However, the image that Malcolm X is a racist is plastered all over everything and everywhere.
When we express our desire not to mix with whites, they call us a hate group, And Martin Luther King is running around here telling Negroes to love all kind of white people, and they sick dogs on Martin Luther King. So it answers itself and it shows the hypocrisy of the white man.
The reason Malcolm X's image was so demonized in the media, I believe, was because he was saying things that were very disruptive to the structures upheld by white supremacy during that time. And there were a lot of people really relying on those structures. You know, they couldn't have those structures collapsing. Are you crazy? Those structures upheld by white supremacy required black people to remain poor and uneducated and timid so that they could continue to be exploited for their free or severely underpaid labor. So in walks Malcolm X, who is this confident black man who is articulate and educated and not afraid to tell white people to their face, "I think you're the devil and I don't trust you." I'm sorry, I'm only laughing because it's so dramatic to call someone the devil, but that's how he felt. Malcolm was encouraging black Americans to have dignity and to command respect.
Tell him how you feel.
He argued that black people should defend themselves and advance themselves by any means necessary. He was teaching black Americans to love themselves, to advocate for themselves, and to advocate for one another.
Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other.
Unlike Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights activists of that time, Malcolm did not advocate for the integration of black Americans into white America. He wanted black Americans to have their own infrastructure, their own economy, their own education systems, their own everything. He also disagreed with the civil rights movement's strategy of nonviolence. He wasn't for violence, he believed in peaceful demonstrations, but he believed that if you're met with violence, you should return the favor.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of those human beings.
The U.S. government hated Malcolm X and they wanted him silenced. However, he was one of the most well-known members of an organization called the NOI, which stands for the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam had its own societal infrastructures. It also had its own military. So Malcolm was completely protected and he wasn't breaking any laws, so there wasn't much that the government could do to stop him. Once Malcolm became a member of the Nation of Islam, he devoted his entire life to advocating for the institution. He lived and breathed the Nation of Islam, and debatably he was the most well-known member they'd ever had. Unfortunately, it would be members within the Nation of Islam that would lead to Malcolm's murder. Allegedly. I say allegedly because I don't know if I'm legally allowed to say that, and the organization is still alive and well today, and they deny any involvement in his death whatsoever, even though there's a lot of evidence that supports otherwise. But you know what? I wasn't there, so we're gonna say allegedly. Alright, so as soon as I finish putting primer on this eye, we're gonna get in our time machine and we're gonna go back in time and find out what happened. How did Malcolm go from being one of the greatest spokesperson for this organization to them trying to have him killed or killing him allegedly? Let me just finish. We're gonna go back, we're gonna talk about it. Alright, put your seatbelt on. Alright, you guys, we've arrived. We're going to start the story in 1946. In 1946, Malcolm was still going by his government name, Malcolm Little, and he was arrested for picking up a stolen watch and convicted to an 8 to 10 year prison sentence. His life up to that point had been pretty tragic. His father was killed by a white supremacist group when he was 6, and when he was 12, his mother was institutionalized, so he and his 6 siblings were separated and sent into foster care. When Malcolm was 18, he moved to New York City and turned to a life of crime to make money, and he was doing all of the crimes. He was gambling, stealing, pimping, selling drugs. He was doing all of the crimes. And in 1946, he was arrested when he tried to pick up a stolen watch that he dropped off at a repair shop. They got him, they locked him up. This was 3 months before his 21st birthday. So Malcolm definitely had a rough start to life. Very sad things happened to him out of his control. And going to prison seemed like it might have been just adding on to all of the terrible things that had happened to him growing up, but it actually turned out to be one of the ways Malcolm was able to turn his life around. Malcolm had always been very intelligent, and while in prison, he redeveloped his love for books and reading and began educating himself and expanding his vocabulary. While in prison, Malcolm began receiving letters from his brothers telling him about a new organization that they joined called the Nation of Islam, and that the Nation of Islam was all about helping and uplifting Black Americans, and they urged Malcolm to look into it and to join himself. Malcolm was very interested in learning more about the Nation of Islam because they represented something that was really important to him. His parents were actually Black activists in the 1920s, and they advocated for this organization that was for uplifting African Americans. Many of them post-slavery had no economic wherewithal. So Malcolm's dad was a key figure in his community to help uplift African Americans, and that is the reason he was targeted and killed by white supremacists. So for Malcolm, hearing that there was another organization doing the same thing, he was like, I like this. I want to learn more about this. So he decided to write a letter to the Nation of Islam's leader at the time, a man named Elijah Muhammad, and he wanted just to get more understanding about what the Nation of Islam was all about. Malcolm sends the letter to Elijah, and they begin writing each other regularly. Elijah helps Malcolm with understanding himself and his relationship to God, and he also advises Malcolm to renounce his past and promise to never return to the way that he was living before. The members of the Nation of Islam have a very strict moral code. They're not allowed to drink, smoke, eat pork, have sex, none of that stuff. And that was all the stuff that Malcolm loved to do before he got to prison. That's why he was in prison. But he renounced his past life, and Elijah even helped him develop a relationship with God. In 1952, when Malcolm is released from prison, he finally goes to visit Elijah Muhammad in person. He wants to meet the man who's changed his life and who's become his great friend through writing him while he was in prison. So Malcolm goes to Chicago, where the Nation of Islam's headquarters was at the time, I believe, to meet Elijah. And it's important to note that Elijah was revered within the Nation of Islam. He wasn't only the leader, the members kind of looked at him as being this like godlike figure. They referred to him as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's how they said his name anytime they said it. They'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's house. That's kind of cool. I wish people would call me the Honorable Sydney Black. Oh yeah, I'm just watching the Honorable Sydney Black's videos. Just kidding, don't do that. That's weird. It's kind of creepy. Anyways, Elijah was revered by the members of the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm came to also revere Elijah. He had changed his life, and most importantly, he'd given Malcolm hope for the future. I don't think Malcolm really had hope for his future prior to going to prison, and now he did, and he attributed that to Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Elijah also came to really love and admire Malcolm. They developed a father and son relationship. They were very close. Elijah recognized the fact that Malcolm was brilliant. He was very intelligent. He was good with his words. He was an excellent leader and speaker. And soon after he got out of prison, he became a leader within the Nation of Islam and moved up very quickly. Malcolm was given leadership positions within the Nation of Islam and began expanding the membership rapidly. Like, it went from hundreds to thousands of people. Almost anyone who heard Malcolm speak was so moved and inspired that they became a member of the NOI. NOI is the Nation of Islam. I'm going to refer to them as the NOI from here on out because that's just easier. So, all right. Now, Elijah Muhammad was a very respected leader, obviously. He was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he was a very intelligent man, but he knew that he didn't possess the same charisma that Malcolm had. Malcolm had a way of captivating his listeners and truly inspiring them. He also had the looks of a leader. Malcolm was very handsome, tall, and Elijah wasn't so, I don't want to be rude, but he definitely knew that Malcolm had pretty privilege. Like, he was much more attractive than he was. Malcolm's physical appearance definitely attributed to the fact that his popularity rose very quickly within the organization. He was good looking. He was easy on the eyes, if you know what I mean. Other leaders in the organization were kind of jealous of Malcolm. They didn't like how popular he became so quickly, but Elijah did not see Malcolm as a threat because he knew that Malcolm was 100% loyal to him. Again, they had a very father-son relationship. They were very close. Elijah's children were jealous of the fact that Elijah treated Malcolm better than he treated his own children. Malcolm would make his undying loyalty to Elijah very, very apparent. So in Elijah's eyes, it was great for him. He's like, wow, now I have the guy who's going to grow this place like wildfire.
Through Malcolm's participation and leadership in the group, that group grows into over 25,000 committed members.
Hey, everybody in Harlem is a Muslim.
So everything was going great until the good guys at the FBI got involved, of course. Anytime I do a video that happened before 1960, it's always J. Edgar Hoover's bitch ass. Always. So the FBI had begun surveying the NOI and Elijah Muhammad because they were nervous at the fact that they had their own military. So they were like, let's just keep an eye on these guys. So the FBI was spying on the Nation of Islam, mainly on the leader Elijah Muhammad. But that all changed in 1957 after the Hinton Johnson incident. In 1957, Hinton Johnson, who was the member of the NOI in Harlem, where Malcolm was the leader, was walking down the street with two other members of the NOI when they run into a police officer, a group of police officers, beating an unarmed black man who was laying on the ground, and they were hitting him with nightsticks while he was laying on the ground, defenseless. When Hinton sees this, he yells to the police officers, "Hey, this is not Alabama, this is New York City." One of the police officers gets so mad at this, he takes his already unjustifiable rage from the defenseless man who's on the ground and starts beating Hinton instead with a nightstick. He's like, "What? What'd you say to me?" And starts beating Hinton really badly. And then the police officers arrest all of the black men who were there. They arrest the guy who was on the ground getting beaten, they arrest Hinton, and they arrest the two people who were with Hinton. A bystander who was there saw everything that went down and went to go and tell Malcolm. And Malcolm goes with a group of people, like him and 5 people, go down to the police station and they demand to see the members of the NOI who have been arrested. At first, the police officers just played dumb. They were like, "We don't know what you're talking about. We haven't arrested any Muslims. Like, we don't know what you're talking about. Sorry." But Malcolm is persistent. He doesn't give up and he stays and demands to see the members of the NOI. After a while, word goes around town about what's going on and people start showing up to the police station to support Malcolm. After about 500 people show up outside of the police station, the police are like, oh shoot, okay, all right, fine, we have him, you can see him. When Malcolm sees Hinton, it's very clear that he needs medical attention and that he shouldn't have just been thrown in jail without seeing a doctor. So Malcolm insists that Hinton goes to the hospital to get treatment, and the police are like, okay, fine, but he has to come back. They're being so petty. Like, you shouldn't have arrested him in the first place. You shouldn't have beat him and then arrested him in the first place. Anyways, they let him go to the hospital and come back. By the time Hinton comes back from the hospital to the police station, there are thousands of people standing outside. It went from 500 to like 4,000 people protesting outside of the police station. Malcolm is still inside of the police station and he was able to get bail for the other 2 members, but the police officers refused to release Hinton. They were like, no, he has to stay until tomorrow, so they were being so petty. I don't understand. But at least he'd gotten the medical attention that he needed. They beat him so badly he had brain contusions and hemorrhages, so he could have died in that cell if he didn't get help. But once he'd gotten the help, at least he was going to be okay, and the police were adamant about not letting him out, so Malcolm realized he'd done all he could, and he leaves the police station to address the thousands of people standing outside waiting. And when Malcolm goes outside, all he does is one hand movement. I don't know what the hand movement was, but he does one hand movement and the crowd falls silent and then they just silently disperse. One hand movement and everyone just disperses. The police were terrified. When they witnessed this, they were like, oh my God, they were so shook. They'd never seen a man with that much power, and let alone a black man. They were like, oh shit, okay, we f***ed up. We f***ed up. The story made national news and the American public became aware of who Malcolm X was. Before then, his popularity was pretty much just within the NOI, but now everyone knew who he was. And the NYPD began following him everywhere. Of course, the FBI heard about this incident and they were also shook. They were like, dang, okay, we need to beef up our surveillance on this guy because what? We didn't know he got so... When did he get so powerful? So the FBI began heavily surveying Malcolm after this. They were tapping his phones. They were tracking his location constantly. They even sent in secret informants to get close to him. And nobody knew this until the day he died. Some of the people who were working closest to him were FBI informants. J. Edgar Hoover was tracking the whereabouts of anyone he deemed a threat. Really anyone he didn't like. The goal of this was to get something incriminating or embarrassing or anything he could do to discredit this person or tarnish their reputation in some way. And this usually worked. However, on Malcolm, they couldn't find anything. Nothing. He was the epitome of a law-abiding citizen. He didn't break any laws. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He didn't cheat on his wife. He didn't do anything. They had nothing. Even the secret informants were like, yeah, I don't know. He's pretty great. We don't know what to tell you, boss. He's pretty great. He's like, He's a great guy. Sorry. This made J. Edgar Hoover really, really nervous. He was like, oh my, I'm usually able to find something. You mean to tell me there's nothing on this guy? He was getting so upset. Meanwhile, Malcolm is still just minding his business, growing the NOI like crazy. He's recruiting celebrities. He's opening chapters in different states. He's known all over the country. J. Edgar Hoover's like, no, oh my God, no. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? J. Edgar Hoover is so upset. So a couple years go by, and by the early 1960s, things start looking up for J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI. And I'm not rooting for them in this story, by the way. Honestly, them, but things start going in their favor. The FBI learns that Malcolm and Elijah are no longer seeing things eye to eye. They're not getting along too well. Of course, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI is thrilled about this because they're like, we didn't know what we were going to do about these guys. Thank God they're fighting. Thank goodness. Firstly, Malcolm disagreed about the way that Elijah was running the organization. He felt that they could be doing more to support and uplift the members. Some of their members were still very, very impoverished and being brutalized by law enforcement with no repercussions, and Malcolm wanted to intervene. He wanted to use the military that the NOI had to help. But Elijah didn't really want to intervene. He didn't really want to help. Meanwhile, he and his family are living like kings and queens off of the revenue stream that's coming in for the NOI, while many of their members are still very, very poor. Malcolm also disagreed with how political Elijah had become. He became way more concerned with the image of the NOI rather than actually uplifting and helping Black Americans. The last reason that Elijah and Malcolm weren't seeing eye to eye, and probably the most shocking reason, Malcolm discovers that Elijah has been having extramarital affairs with some of his very young secretaries, and he's fathered children with some of them. And by very young, we're talking 15 and 16, like illegal young, like disgusting young. When Malcolm finds out about this, he's very upset for multiple reasons. For one, the NOI has very strict rules. It's a very strict moral code that all of the members must follow, and as the leader, Elijah was breaking it. For two, Malcolm now had a wife and daughters. He met his wife through the Nation of Islam, and the rules for women were more strict, which Malcolm disagreed on. He was an advocate against sexism within the Nation of Islam. So to find out that the leader was taking advantage of very, very vulnerable young women within the organization, Malcolm did not like that one bit. He didn't like it. When Elijah was confronted about all of this, he didn't deny any of it. Instead, he justified his behavior through biblical teachings. I can't. What is it with men and like keeping it in their pants? It's like this biological urge that I think they should be more embarrassed of. Like they should really, really get that in control. What is that about? And why do they have to be told not to do it with children? It's disgusting. Anyways, Elijah was rumored to have fathered 15 illegitimate children. He had 23 children total, 8 from his marriage and 15 from other women in the organization. The final straw between Malcolm and Elijah came in 1963 after the death of President Kennedy. In 1963, after President Kennedy was assassinated, everyone wanted to know what Malcolm thought about it. He was a very opinionated guy who would talk about what he thought all the time, and he was very critical of President Kennedy for his entire term.
Anytime a man running for president tells Negroes what he's going to do for them when he gets in office, and after he gets in office, he has time to do something for everybody else except the people that put him in office. He tricked the people who put him in office. When it comes to time to correcting the injustices that are being inflicted against Negroes in this country, Kennedy sits up there like Nero. He's fiddling while...
It was no secret that Malcolm X disagreed with a lot of what Kennedy was doing and saying. So after he died, naturally people wanted to know about what Malcolm thought of his death. However, Elijah knew that President Kennedy was very popular amongst the public, and to speak badly of him after his death would just not be a good look, and it would make the NOI look really bad. So he forbid Malcolm from bringing it up. He said, if you do any speeches, you do any lectures, do not talk about JFK. Do not talk about JFK. That's what he told him. Malcolm wanted to do his best to still respect Elijah as the leader, even though they weren't really seeing eye to eye, and he disagreed with a lot of the things that Elijah was doing. He still knew that he was the leader and he needed to be respectful, so he said, okay, I'm not going to talk about JFK. I won't talk about it. On December 1st, 1963, Malcolm was set to give a lecture, and he gives his whole speech and doesn't bring up JFK the entire time. After he was done speaking, he allowed questions from the audience, and of course, multiple people ask, what do you think about the assassination of JFK? What do you think about the fact that JFK was just killed? Malcolm responds to the question by saying, I think the chickens have come home to roost. Or in other words, what goes around comes around. Everybody was like, oh. The press misinterpreted what Malcolm said as him being happy that JFK had been killed, but that's not what he meant. What he meant was JFK being killed was a result of the political climate of hate. There was so much hate going around, especially towards Black Americans, that eventually it was going to come back. You can't give out hate without getting it back. That's what he meant. But it didn't really matter what he meant. Honestly, it was kind of insensitive to say that anyway. And the press had already made a habit of villainizing him and making him seem like a crazy person. Elijah knew this, and he was infuriated. He was like, I told you not to say anything about JFK. I strictly forbid it. And you did it anyway. You're grounded. He grounds Malcolm X. Elijah places Malcolm on a 90-day suspension and forbids him from speaking on behalf of the NOI. Malcolm was very upset by this. He was upset that he had disappointed Elijah. He was also upset that he couldn't speak anymore because that was what he loved to do. He was great at it. The FBI is just listening to all of this, and they are stoked. They are so happy. So happy. Once the NOI publicly announces that Malcolm X is going to be suspended for the next 90 days, the FBI also begins feeding information to the press based on the information they've accumulated from stalking them, being weirdos. They start feeding information to the press to separate the two men even more, like creating a bigger divide, like feeding rumors, gossiping. That's what the FBI was doing. They were gossiping. Through listening to Elijah's conversations and other leaders of the NOI, the FBI could pretty much see that Malcolm was not going to be reinstated, that the suspension was the end of his relationship with the NOI, but Malcolm didn't know this. He still thought that it was just going to be 90 days and then he was going to be back in action. The FBI goes to him during this time, and they tried to get him to become an informant for them. They're like, you could turn on Elijah Muhammad and come work for us. What do you say? Malcolm's like, absolutely not. Please get out of my house. Malcolm remains loyal to Elijah Muhammad. After the 90 days is over, Malcolm doesn't hear anything from Elijah Muhammad or any of the members. He's noticed that they're kind of like ignoring him, avoiding him. So he realizes that he's not gonna come back. He's basically been fired. He's been kicked out. He's been exiled. And he's very, very sad about this. But he's like, you know what? Fine. I want to go back to speaking. I want to go back to doing what I love, speaking, inspiring, and helping people. So fine, I'm out. On March 8th, 1964, Malcolm announces that he's leaving the NOI and starting his own organization and mosque separate from Elijah Muhammad. Now that Malcolm was on his own, he could begin working with civil rights activists that he was not allowed to work with before. He began traveling internationally and speaking to people all across the world. He was invited to speak and debate at prestigious universities like Oxford and Harvard. Malcolm's popularity was continuing to increase, and Elijah hated this. Remember earlier when we talked about how Malcolm was obviously the more charismatic leader out of he and Elijah, but Elijah didn't mind because Malcolm was loyal to Elijah. Now he wasn't. Now he was competition. It was a problem. He had to go. The NOI had its own newspaper publication that all of the members would read, so they began writing smear campaigns against Malcolm and trying to tarnish his reputation. When Malcolm learns about this, he retaliates by telling everyone Elijah Muhammad's business. He tells everyone that Elijah Muhammad has fathered children out of wedlock and that some of them were very young. They were underage. But I guess this was only a big deal to Malcolm. Many of the members were like, well, he is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, so it's fine. I guess they believed his biblical references. What does that even mean? Most of the members didn't care. Some of them did. And some people did leave the NOI and go and join Malcolm's new organization, but for the most part, they were like, oh, it's fine, whatever. Elijah, of course, didn't like that Malcolm was airing all his dirt out, so he retaliates by having Malcolm and his family evicted from their family home. Apparently, the house that Malcolm and his family were living in was owned by the Nation of Islam. I mean, he knew this because they had bought the house when he was working for the Nation of Islam, when he was growing the organization by the thousands, right? He'd earned the house, but the house was still in the organization's name, so they had rights to it, and they were like, sorry, you gotta leave. Sorry. Malcolm opens a case to fight for his home because he deserved his home, right? Like, He earned it. Then he and his family began receiving death threats. They were receiving death threats via the phone or letters or whatever. It was very scary. And Malcolm suspected that it was the members of the NOI who were behind this. Malcolm reports the death threats that he and his family are getting, and this infuriates members of the NOI because they're like, how dare you even imply that the Honorable Elijah would do such a thing? He would never do this. Why would you even say that? He would never, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would never, ever. Meanwhile, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI are still listening to both sides, and they have recorded evidence of Elijah Muhammad insinuating that Malcolm X should die. He doesn't directly say it. He's too smart to say that flat out, but he does imply that he would like Malcolm X killed. The FBI also had recorded evidence of other NOI members just flat out saying, yeah, Malcolm X is gonna die. Yeah, Malcolm X is gonna be killed soon. Yeah, we're gonna kill Malcolm X soon. They have recorded evidence of that. They had so much evidence that legally they were required to notify Malcolm X that there was a threat to his life. They legally had to protect him as a citizen. So the FBI go to Malcolm X's house to offer him protection. They tell him that, hey, we have information that the NOI is planning to kill you. And Malcolm X is like, yeah, I know. I'm aware. I've been saying this for months now. But Malcolm refuses protection from the FBI because he doesn't trust them. He knows that they also want him dead. Like, I'm not going to accept your protection. Are you kidding me? As soon as I accept your protection, I'm going to end up dead. You guys are probably going to kill me quicker than the NOI. They won't even get a chance. Absolutely not. The FBI knew that Malcolm X would refuse their help because they knew he was smarter than that, but they still had to have record of them offering in case. On February 14th, 1965, a day before Malcolm was supposed to appear in court to fight for his house, a firebomb was thrown through his front window while he and his family were inside and literally exploded his house, like set his house on fire. So of course, Malcolm and his family get out as quick as they can. They call the police and they wait 45 minutes outside on the curb while their house is burning for anyone to show up. 45 minutes before the police get there. When the police finally arrive after almost an hour, they're like, oh, do you know who could have done this? And he's like, I don't know. I've been receiving death threats from the NOI. Maybe they did it. And the police are like, oh, yeah, okay, well, there's not really much we can do because there's no evidence. Like, of course there's no evidence. It's all gone because I've been waiting 45 minutes for y'all to get here. The NYPD had no intention on helping Malcolm X because they hated him. When asked by reporters what had happened, the police said that maybe Malcolm did it himself. He could have just done it himself for publicity. Elijah Muhammad said the same thing. Like, I don't know who did it. Maybe he did it himself. He probably did it himself. Yes, I burned my own house down on purpose. For publicity. Malcolm and his family had nowhere to go after their house was burned down. He also wasn't doing well financially because all of his money was tied in with the NOIs. He had continued telling people that he was receiving death threats and that the NOI was behind it, but it was kind of just, no one did anything about it. And there wasn't anyone he trusted to do anything about it. He didn't trust the FBI. He didn't trust the police. In the weeks leading up to Malcolm's death, everyone who was around him said that he pretty much knew he was going to die and he just accepted it. He knew that there was nothing that could stop it. But he continued working and showing up to public lectures and gatherings. He was very brave, actually. Can you imagine, like, knowing people are trying to kill you and there's nothing anyone's gonna do about it, but still going places and doing things? That's crazy. It's very brave. He was very, very brave. On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm was scheduled to speak at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City. And normally for a venue this size and with someone like Malcolm's popularity, the NYPD would typically send 20 police officers to do security. However, for this event, they only sent two police officers. Malcolm had his own team of security, but not nearly as much. Like, we needed more security. We needed more security, folks. Other speakers were also scheduled to speak before Malcolm. However, none of them showed up because they knew the dangers associated with speaking on the same stage as him. So it was just Malcolm and everyone who came to see him, and 2 police officers. Malcolm gets on stage and starts speaking, and shortly after he began, 3 men rush the stage shouting, and one of them pulls off a sawed-off shotgun and shoots Malcolm, where he would slowly bleed out on the stage. His bodyguards were able to capture one of the men, however the other 2 got away. People who were there and witnessed Malcolm being shot on stage said that the men involved were just black Muslims. That was really all they could give, except for rough estimates of height and weight. There was not much to go on. So the police pretty much arrested the first men that they could find. They had one of the guys who was actually involved, and then the other two were just guys who fit the description, even though the description was very vague. There was an informant who worked for the FBI or the police who was there and saw everything that happened, and he actually tried to resuscitate Malcolm's life on the stage. He was trying to save him. But this guy was never called to testify. He was never called or asked to testify on what he saw, who might have done this, because they really didn't care to solve it. It's commonly known that the men who were arrested and charged for Malcolm's murder didn't actually do it, but the police didn't care on actually investigating it. They were honestly probably just happy that somebody did it, which is very, very messed up to say. The two guys who were innocent spent 20 years in prison for his murder. So after Malcolm died and the case was closed, that was really it. If you guys would like to watch, I watched this really in-depth documentary on Netflix about Malcolm's death, and he actually solved who did it, but by that point it was too late. It was still a very, very entertaining documentary. It's a little long, but if you would like to know more about this in depth, I highly, highly recommend it. I will link it down below. Elijah Muhammad and the NOI still deny having any involvement in the death of Malcolm X, even though the FBI has recorded evidence of it, but I don't know. Listen, I guess I'm just stay out of it. Malcolm X eventually changed his name to Malcolm Shabazz, so that is the name that his wife Betty and all of his daughters still have today. His teaching and influences inspired the Black Panther Party of the 1970s, and it's still like the stuff he was saying then really isn't that controversial today. Black people should be treated equally. If you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. What else? Support Black-owned businesses. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this Makeup and History. I so appreciate if you're still here to the end. Please leave me a comment and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or you learned something. Alright, you guys, I love you so much. Stick around and watch some of my other videos and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so that you can see me the next time I'm here. Alright, I'm gonna go. I'm making it weird now, so I'm gonna go. Bye, love you, bye.